And going back to our story about India's External Affairs Minister Jaishankar calling for fair international order at the Raisina Dialogue. Joining us is Ambassador Mohan Kumar, former senior diplomat, who will help us understand this in greater context. Dr. Mohan Kumar, how does the shift to a multipolar world shake up things in a way, in the global system, especially in the UN?
Well, thank you very much for having me. I think what we are seeing is essentially the definitive end of the liberal international order as we know it. And that has happened, it's been happening for a while, but I would say the actions of President Trump have ensured that there is now no going back. I don't think we will go back to the old order. In its place, what I expect is to have a multipolar world order, as you rightly say. But I have to be honest, I think we are some distance away from settled multipolar world order. I'm only able to see the broad contours of it. It's not clear to me what shape it will eventually take. So that is where we are. This is a period of transition. This is a period of confusion. And it's also a period of jostling by middle powers and other powers for advantage.
Indeed. So the UN's outdated structure makes it harder to deal with today's challenges. That's pretty clear. But, does the UN realize that? Does the Cozy Club at the helm of affairs realize that? I think your first answer seems to indicate that's not the case, and you say that some way down the road before they do.
I think if you take the United Nations, I think there are well-meaning people in the United Nations Secretariat who I think believe the organization needs to be updated. It's just that they are completely powerless, I think, frankly. So if you're talking about the reform, more often than not, you will be talking about the reform of the Security Council. Now, why would anybody who has got a permanent membership and who has got a veto power give it up for lesser power and perhaps no veto power? So that is problem number one. It's like a club. So why would anybody allow, others to come in, which may dilute the clout that I have today? So that's problem number one. Problem number two, I think it is very clear that there has been a shift in terms of economic power. Globalization has been badly affected. Some people say globalization has been replaced by slowbalization and so on. So we are also in the middle of a world that is undergoing changes. And what the UN has done, I think, is by not reforming itself, the United Nations has done great disservice to itself and to the others, because right now nobody takes the UN seriously. I think that is what the Honorable External Affairs Minister hinted as well. And I would say largely the major players of the United Nations should take the blame for this state of affairs. There is no representation for the African continent. India doesn't have a seat in the high table. Germany, Japan doesn't have a seat at the high table. Europe is overrepresented. And Africa is, as I said, completely unrepresented. So it is, I think this point has been made ad nauseum by India, that the current composition of the United Nations Security Council is not reflective of the contemporary realities of today. This is something that happened in 1945, and we've just got stuck with it.
Dr. Mohan Kumar, given India's emergence as one of the poles in this multipolar order, how does that shape India's push, in fact, to bring about a fair, more inclusive global order?
So India is an emerging pole, frankly, Mark. I wouldn't say we have emerged, but I think you're quite right. We are definitely an emerging pole, and we bid fair to be an independent pole in a future multipolar world. And I think it is legitimate for India to ask the UN that, listen, what kind of a future do you have if you don't reform? So that is the point we have been making. But today's point by the External Affairs Minister was slightly different. I think he's also pointing out some substantive mistakes committed by the UN, not just the
Right.
reform, the lack of reform, and the fact that the UN Security Council is not representative. He's actually going back to double standards by the
Right,
UN.
exactly. I mean,
How
about the Kashmir
Kashmir.
example, in fact, that's a question I have in mind. The Kashmir example, it tells us about the UN's inconsistencies. But when it comes to that's about sovereignty and fairness and how they look at things. What extent can this be revisited? I mean, you talked about the possibilities. Can it be revisited?
Oh, I think at some point it must be. If the UN wants to regain credibility, it must look at all these things and see how you can recalibrate your positions. Nothing is cast in stone. Just because the UN took a position, just because the US, UK, Canada, and Britain took a position in 45, it doesn't mean they have to take the same position in 2025. That is precisely the minister's point. So much water is flown under the bridge, and
Yeah.
we are still stuck to the same positions and so on. I also think India was a little naive in taking the issue to the UN, and he is right. The honorable minister is right. We expressed our confidence in the UN, and that confidence was betrayed in the case of Kashmir. That is part of the problem that India faces actually.
Dr. Kumar, a final question. With the rise of the global south, also with new technologies, AI, in fact, all these things are changing the world, shaking things up in a sense. So do you see these changes calling for or automatically bringing about a fresh global perspective? And do you think that dialogues like the Raisina Dialogue actually help?
I wish I could say yes. And unfortunately, there is no automaticity about these things. I certainly think the fora like the Raisina Dialogue certainly help in the sense that others will come to know about India's view. We can have a better understanding of where the problems are, what the views of other major partners that India has. All that is fine. But there is no automaticity that all this will translate into action next week. That's the problem. They come, they speak, and it's excellent exchange of views, and then they go back to the capitals. Sorry. And then nobody is able to bell the cat. That's the problem we have. But I would not underestimate the value of Raisina Dialogue. I think it's fantastic to have these dialogues. But what I'm questioning is a direct link between this dialogue and action at the UN or action in multilateral fora. International relations and geopolitics is never straightforward like that. I think it requires years and years. It's a factor of whether India can persuade its partners, whether India acquires so much clout that it becomes unignorable. My best situation for India is that we should make our position so absolutely non-negotiable that the UN cannot afford to ignore our claims. That's the best way to go forward, I think.
We leave it there. Thank you very much, Ambassador Mohan Kumar, former senior diplomat. Thank you for putting those things into perspective for us.